All right, welcome everybody to the next AMA tonight. We've got Ian Camacho.
Hey
Sorry,
everybody,
so
thanks for having me. And I feel like you've got the whitest guy to come on right after that song, so thank you, appreciate it.
thank you. I appreciate that too. All right, Ian. Well, welcome back to the Save America Discord and for our AMA series and guest town hall speaker. I wanted to have you on and thank you for agreeing to come on tonight to talk specifically about a lot of the things that Look Ahead America has been doing because you guys have been very busy.
Yeah. Actually, funny that you mentioned that. I will try to keep this relatively short because in an hour we have our last town hall in Arizona. Matt Brainerd's actually hosting it with Ken Bennett over there, answering questions about the Arizona audit. People can chime in, so I'll try to be quick so people can hop from there, hit this to that. We have double feature going on tonight. Look ahead.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. So, why don't we get started? And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started with Look Ahead America, what you do there, and what do you like about working with Look Ahead America?
Yeah, no problem. So, and I actually see, let me see, I'm looking in the audience real quickly here. I see some other mods there. Hey, Abdul. And I see some of our research team. I see Mayflower and Trumper Treason, who was actually with us in the VIP. And I'm going to go answer this question shortly. I'm not stalling, I swear. I'm just checking to see who's here. I see Takeo and I see Pomeli, who's been awesome. We have a bunch of people who've been helping out and I've kind of worked with in different capacities. So the way I got involved with Look Ahead was, right after the 2020 election. Um, I, like everyone else, was like, "Hey, it's 3 in the morning and there's still no results. This is weird." And people were looking to find all kinds of, basically wanted to find out like what happened in terms of the election because it was very suspect, right? It just didn't seem usual the way that everything went down. So we started looking in a lot of the obvious places like dead voters, um, vacant lots, things like that, and that took a lot of time for very little payout. And I believe there was. She also worked in marketing. There was a person on the voter integrity project server who had mentioned that, hey, a lot of things that one of the things I should say rather that marketing departments do with companies is they claim to be in a suite or a unit. Let's see if we can check there. And in the process, Trumper Treason, by the way, who's here, was awesome. He ran a lot of the SQL searches. He and some of the others they made matches and found over 1,000 in Pennsylvania. People registered at post office boxes, that is, or in Georgia, several hundred in other states like Arizona. So we just found them all over the place. And for those of you who are not aware of that work, um, it's illegal to register at a post office box in virtually every state. I think the only state that does allow it is Virginia, but you cannot make your registered address a post office box. It's explicit in pretty much every registration. And these people we felt were committing fraud because not only were they registering there, they were hiding and saying, oh, it's an apartment or it's a suite or it's a unit. So we felt that was indicative of fraud. And Tron, who actually knew someone who knew Matt Brainerd, got him that information, and it worked its way into SCOTUS filing, into some pretty funny memes at the time, and yeah, that's pretty much how it got incorporated into his work. And we weren't. And funny enough, we had no idea about Matt Brainerd at the time. We didn't even know there was another group in North Carolina called the Voter Integrity Project. It was just like something in the air. We didn't plan that out. It just worked out that way. Um, and after the everything went down and it was January, I actually went out with a few other people who were from our server. I met Matt in DC for just to say hi and introduce ourselves and everything. And then, January 6th happened and I was let go from my job. And the reason for that was because they said I was not a fit, which was funny because I had just been given a nice end of year bonus and they said I'm a great worker and everything's good. Um, because they knew my leanings and I guess yeah. But it was great because one door closed, another door opened, and I said, hey, Matt, I'm available now if you want anything. So that's how it ended up working out. And yeah, so that's now I'm at Look Ahead America working in the research group, which is great.
Nice. So I kind of want to go back to some things you kind of mentioned there. I think it's really important for our audience to understand the election process from start to finish. And I think a lot of what people understand as potential fraud, they're looking at fraud towards the end of the election process and really not at the beginning of the process, which is something that you mentioned. Um, Voter registration is an important part of the process. And you had mentioned that multiple people were voting or registering to vote at dead lots or empty lots, at post office boxes, at suites, which are usually, I would say, business places of business is usually a suite address. So those types of things are easy to flag in the voter registration system. How do you guys get access to the information that you're doing research on?
That's a great question. Um, and I actually 100% agree with you. I believe one of the problems that I think we learned the hard way in the 2020 election um, is that we were caught playing defense, and you never really want to be on defense. It's much easier to go on offense. And had we been cleaning the roles ahead of time, a lot of these things could have been challenged, and we would have caught a lot more stuff. That all being said, the way to as far as getting voter rolls, it really depends. If and maybe Pamela, we can explain this, but if you go, like, for example, if you go to Pennsylvania, it's only $20 to get it there. If you go to Georgia, it's like free. But then there's some states where it's exorbitantly expensive. We had a guy on our server. He had actually put up in Wisconsin, the voter roll there is $25,000, which is not even the most expensive one. There's one in Alabama, which is $37,000. But fortunately for most states, it's pretty accessible. But yeah, it's usually like a fee of anywhere from free to, I don't know, I want to say $1,000 depending on the state. Usually you have to be a resident. And then as far as what we were doing with post office boxes, all of that is public information. So you can find leased and owned post offices. Excuse me, USPS. You can get FedEx. You can get UPS, things like that. And then you more or less join those two, and using a blacklist of illegal registration locations, and yeah, that's pretty much how we determined it. And as just to kind of finish what you were saying earlier, if we had screened these ahead of time, we could a candidate such as President Trump or someone on a state level could have challenged these and saying these are illegal registrations, they should not be allowed. It's a lot harder to do once it's cast because it's a huge time crunch, and it's very difficult. So that's one of the things we're looking to do for this next election midterms is to clean up the voter rolls.
Very nice. Is there a specific mechanism that's used to, kind of prompt the removal of those illegal addresses from the voter rolls?
In terms of, like, are you talking like the software? Like, I know one of the ones you can do is I'm actually not super tech at this. I kind of do a little bit more of the management side, so I'm probably a little bit out of my element here. So, um, as far as once you have so once what happens is you find a match, right, and then we verify those. So, for example, we're going through the post office boxes. You see, okay, these are potential matches. You want to make sure they're not false positives. Also something we learned the hard way, but it's our first time doing it. And you want to make sure that this is you're only checking, for example, the FedEx in the building and not flagging all the other apartments which are legal, right? You want to make sure that this is actually a post office and not something else that got flagged. So we'll check things like property records, which is public access, public information. Excuse me. We would check Google Maps. And we would just check, kind of a lot of different tools to make sure that this is definitely an illegal registration. We would gather that information. And ideally, actually, it's probably easiest if you're a candidate and you're running in a state or a local election, because then you could furnish that to the Secretary of State or to the clerk of that area and say, these people should not be registered, and here's why. That's one way of doing it. That's kind of what we were doing. But stuff we're also looking at right now in Look Ahead America involves the national change of address, and some other ones we've done are reports the out-of-state subsequent registration, which is a fancy way of saying you've registered in another state and come back and vote in the old state, which is illegal. So we try to find things that a candidate or the Secretary of State can look at and say, this is hard proof. It's not just some abstraction.
Mhm. Yeah, so as a precinct captain, I know that when I get ready to hand out materials for the candidates that are connected with my local Republican organization, I get a list of voters in my precinct, and usually that list contains names and then ages and whether they voted in the primaries and which ballot type they chose, like whether they're Democrats or Republicans, whether they
Hmm.
voted in general elections, um, whether they voted in the local elections. And then I take that list and I can see addresses on that list. So if I were to see addresses with PO boxes or with potential, empty lots, I could report those to you guys and you guys would look into them. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's something we're planning on doing. So right now, we're currently working on Arizona, then Pennsylvania for 2020. But then the next plan right after that is going to be, as you just mentioned, looking through the voter rolls for pretty much all the states and challenging the illegal registrations. Um, you're going to get pushback, obviously, but you need to. That's why we want to be very thorough. We've kind of incorporated this with like each iteration of each report. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, by law, they if you have a good challenge and they can say this should not be counted, um, yeah, they have to set that envelope aside when it comes in, or they have to pull that voter aside and say, hey, your voter is illegal, and you'd have to, or excuse me, your registration is illegal, and they would have to re-register or show that they actually are, residing where they are and not at this incorrect location. Because if the candidate finds out that they were letting some of those in and not others, they could say, "Hey, you were, cheating and letting votes for this guy in and not ones for me," or something like that, right? So that's actually where you have the most power is right before an election, not after. Because then they're going to say, well, the margin of victory was too big, anyways. It didn't make a difference, right? So, and people knock that, but that's actually how Obama pretty much won when he was a state senator. I think he challenged about a third of pretty much all the voters on the rolls because he knew what was illegal and dirty, and he pointed those out, and they removed them, and he won. So,
Well, he was a community organizer, right? And
yep,
I think he was somewhat affiliated with Acorn at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And uh, who was it? Project Veritas really got into Acorn. That was their breakthrough. Um, James O'Keefe's breakthrough thing was the
yeah,
Acorn stuff, and really
that's what put him on the map.
Acorn focused on registering voters. That's what they spent most of their time on, and I think they got flagged with a lot of illegal registrations. So that's at the very beginning of the process, like I mentioned. What about it towards the end of the process? I know you guys did the Antrim report. Can you get into that a little bit?
Sure, and just to kind of say, you did touch on community organizing. And Matt talks about this all the time. But people on the right are like, "Oh, community organizing," or like, "Oh, it reminds me of Obama." But you know, it- that's something, and I think Matt Brainerd has rightfully pointed out that the right has ceded a lot of ground on. And it's not enough just to play defense and try to clean up fraud. Like, I mean, because there's going to always be some level of fraud, and hopefully you've removed the majority of it, right? But there'll always be some one or two people who do something illegal, but you want to get the overwhelming bulk, right? But once you more or less clean that up, it's not enough just to shrink down the roles and get rid of like the bad ones. You've also got to grow the roles, and ideally people in your side, right? You want people like Stacey Abrams did that in Georgia, and to her credit, she registered a ton of people over there and educated them as to why they should be voting for their candidates. Um, and that's a skill that people on the right need to get better at. I mean, don't get me wrong, combating fraud's great, but it's kind of a two-pronged approach, right? So it's not just to be defense; you've also got to be on the offense and growing. Um, as far as Antrim, so sorry, that's a bit of a thing, but as far as Antrim, yeah, that report just came out, and I don't know. Are you familiar at all with what went down in Antrim? I'm not sure how your background is on this.
No, so I was watching like everybody else, the results that were coming out and the follow-up stuff, especially about the fraud, about how 6,000 or so votes in Antrim County were originally marked as Biden, but got switched to Trump after the fact. So I know that you guys went into Antrim and did a kind of deep dive into that stuff. So if you could explain the Antrim report a little bit for the audience, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. So, as you said, right, and by the way, Antrim County is a very conservative county. In 2016, I believe, was 64% went for
Yep.
Trump.
Where's it
So
at?
it was.
Just
It's.
for
I'm sorry.
people who don't
I'm
know.
sorry. It's in Michigan. Excuse me.
Yep.
Antrim
Okay.
County, Michigan. I apologize. And in 2020, it went to initially on election night. It went to Joe Biden, and that was unusual because and it went by quite a few thousand. And then the next day, they did a corrected count, and with the Dominion machines, they said, "Oh, they erroneously underreported Trump. He actually won Antrim County by 6,000 votes. This is the correct count." Um, DePerno Law, on behalf of his client Bill Bailey, with ASAGA, the Allied Securities Operations Group. They did their own investigation. Long story short, they said that these machines are designed for fraud in order to flip votes. Their claims were that the machines were, how do you put this? The machines have what's called a rate of error, and so if the machine detects like an error, it says, "Oh, this needs to go to digital adjudication," and that means that it needs a human set of eyes to determine intention. Was this, maybe they didn't fill the bubble in all the way, or maybe they circled it, or maybe they checked it versus, actually fill it in or something. That was kind of the argument. And so then the person who then sees it would say, "Oh, okay, this person voted for Trump. We're going to actually give it to Biden. No one's going to know." That was essentially the basis of their argument. And we looked at, and they also, the other major claims were that the machine was online. There's actually quite a few claims in there. I think we found about 18. And ultimately, the Secretary of State, the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee, Dominion naturally, all said, there's nothing here. It was a mistake. Basically what happened was they forgot to update the ballot form correctly, because in 3 townships, I believe, there had been a last minute candidate that was added, and they updated those ones, but they didn't update the whole county, and so that threw everything off. It basically gave Biden a +1 when they were voting for Trump. So it was a mistake, right? Honest mistake. That's what they said. Um, DePerno disagreed, and basically he had like cyber ninjas. We had all these different groups looking at. So we had cyber ninjas, which is kind of right leaning, and then we had Alex Halderman, which is left leaning. We looked at pretty much every report. We looked at stuff that DePerno had sent, and everything that's public data. And long story short, there really was nothing to those claims. There was a lot of stuff that was theoretical, or stuff that could have happened, or may have happened in the circumstances, but nothing that actually did. Um, and the one thing that we did find, though, is that, which was kind of funny because this is kind of one of the defenses of Dominion, is that they're saying, well, we never deleted ballot images. That was one of many things that DePerno was claiming, like that they were wiping the evidence. It's like, no, we never saved it. We never saved it. We just never deleted it, right? Like there was just no saving because that's the way Antrim had bought it. And even Cyber Ninjas confirmed that. But in the process of admitting that, we found that they actually violated a contract point, which is also a state law. They're supposed to be saving ballot images for write-in candidates, and by doing that, they broke the contract, they broke the law. And so we're arguing that even though DePerno made errors in these claims, Dominion still should be decertified using this because this actually is admitted. Here's the law. Here it is. The downside of what happened with everything that went down in Antrim is that there was just so much misinformation and disinformation. It confused a lot of people. So we tried to be as neutral as we could on that. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to digest. We just published it too. So I'm pretty
No,
proud of our research team. They did a ton of work. We had about 10 people on there. So I'm glad it's over though at the same time.
no, I completely understand. I think a lot of the misinformation or misunderstanding is that people start to believe that these machines will switch votes or stuff like that. And I think in the interim report, if I read correctly, what had happened was that there were split precincts in some of the districts, and what had happened was is that precincts weren't lined up properly, or that there were a couple of machines that were coded wrong for the precinct that they were supposed to be in. So the ballots that were in that precinct were kind of off by one. and that those ones were um, picking up votes from below, basically. So I don't know if anybody here has been an election judge. I've been an election judge for 17 years, and what I've seen is that if you have a split precinct, you're going to have different ballots between two precincts in the same precinct. And so one ballot may have like 20 candidates for different offices. Another ballot may have 19 candidates. So if a machine is coded incorrectly, so if they were supposed to have 19 and they show 20, they may put that 19 at the top, and then the bottom one would get no votes, and everything up would get an extra vote until they figure it out. So, am I correct in kind of
Yeah.
summarizing that a little bit?
In essence, yeah, pretty much what happened. It was they more or less, to summarize, like they just didn't update the software properly. They did on some of the machines because they had said there was a late candidate that got added, and I think he came like October 18th or something, like right
Yeah.
before. Um, and it was something like that, and they updated it like on 3 of the 17 machines in that county, but everything else was off. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something to that effect. And DePerno was saying, well, it only favored Biden and the Democrats, but well, yeah, because everything went up one, right? Like if you were voting down
Right.
ticket, it would do the same thing. And also to and I don't know if you followed what we've done. Look ahead. We're actually in a suit right now against Dominion in Ohio, but we are not trying to defend Dominion. We're not trying to protect them and run cover for them, but we're also not going to make accusations that can't be backed up. It was basically just a mistake, and it wouldn't have been Dominion's fault anyways. It would have been a county clerk or one of the workers there. And mistakes happen. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a crazy time, and yeah, things happen. So that's what we found.
Yeah, for sure.
But if someone does find something, and I said this before, we I should mention too, Matt DePerno did send a cease and desist to us to like he didn't want this information to come out. And maybe I shouldn't say this, but he wanted us not to say anything, and he's actually even kind of publicly called Matt and I like frauds and stuff. But I said, listen, man, if you have information that we haven't seen, please publish it. Like we looked at everything you sent us. We talked to Alex Haldeman, one of the professors and analysts. We've talked to a lot, and we looked through everything here, like 800 plus pages of documents. If someone here has something that we've not seen, that is evidence, we Matt and I will always look at it and say, we made a mistake, right? We've corrected our work before. We did that in the Georgia report. We actually had underreported, funny enough, the post office boxes. We actually, with Trump Treason's help, by the way, we found an extra 300 or so post office boxes we missed the first time, so it actually helped our. But yeah, if anyone finds something, we'll always take a look at it. We're not going to try to be attached one way or the other. So yeah, that's pretty much what happened.
Nice. For current projects, what do you guys got going on right now?
So at the moment, we are working on the Arizona report. It's going to probably be supplementing what we're seeing with the Arizona audit. Um, so that would include the post office boxes we found. We found a few hundred there. We just completed the Maricopa National Change of Address pool. Um, which would yield a few thousand if you extrapolated that out. And we're working right now on the rest of the state of Arizona. So we're hoping to finish that. We were going to probably finish that October, but it's just, you want to be accurate, not necessarily fast here. And then we are also hopefully going to be releasing very soon the Racine report, which is regarding a claim that you may or may not have heard during the election. There were so many that came out. There 23,000 plus people were registered in Wisconsin using the same phone number. Um, and so we looked into that claim. And some people have been, saying that's proof of theft. And so we looked into that a little bit deeper. So yeah, we have a few things coming out.
Nice. Can you go into a little bit more detail about the duplicate phone numbers, maybe duplicate addresses, some of those things like that at all?
Yeah. So just to be clear, it differs state to state, but at least regarding Wisconsin, it is not mandatory to have a phone number in your registration. So, off the top, it doesn't indicate fraud, right? Now, it does indicate sloppy voter rolls. It does indicate a mistake. Um, but yeah, essentially what we found is that claim was correct. There was, or I'm sorry, there is a number that is attached to like 23,262, I think was the number. I have to look at people who have registered to vote.
Same phone number.
We same phone number, right? But that's not their real phone number.
Of course, of course.
We had to do a little digging. We had to do a little digging into this further. And we found some of the people's real numbers. And I actually called them. I was like, "Hey, did you register with this number?" And I spoke with a few of them. Got a few people yelling at me, like, "Don't call me!" But I did speak to a few, and some were very open about what happened. We also spoke to the Wisconsin Election Commission, the WEC, and you can find this all on their website too. But they explained that this was a import error, which is kind of what we thought it was, because that's a massive mistake. It was some old legacy thing that happened in Racine. The people who are not in that county right now, it's because they moved out of Racine, but then when they eventually imported all that old information, that's what happened. But we found not a single one of those people was illegally registered or an illegal voter. So I'm kind of giving up the surprise, but yeah, there was
Yeah,
nothing to that claim. Unfortunately, people were running around saying that's hard proof, and we're like, sorry guys, it's not. It's not like we don't want to find something, but we just didn't see anything there.
of course,
So
of course. So Look Ahead America not only does this investigations into voter fraud or voter roll issues and things like that, they also work to get people registered to vote. Is that correct?
correct. Yep. So we actually got a generous benefactor in Arizona, Jim Lehman, who's actually running right now for Congress. So we have Look Ahead Arizona. That's our main base of where we're registering people at, um, because as you know, it's a very competitive battleground state. But ideally, we'd love to have one in all Look Ahead. I guess whatever state name, Look Ahead Texas, Look Ahead Virginia. In all 50 states. And our goal is to, register, educate, and, train people to get involved with registration as well as with just, general education about how the election process works, right? And how do you clean voter rolls? What are some things you can do to get legislation passed? 'Cause a lot of people don't know how to do that. Making it less scary for them to approach their state senator or their state representative. Um, all that kind of stuff. So we provide the tools for that, and we provide the leadership. And I think actually one of the SVCs is in here. If I think I see Rachel Hawk. Yep. So I believe there's a couple of people in here from that group. But yeah, we provide the opportunity to get involved on a state and local level because too many people focus on just the national when the day-to-day stuff that you're going to be dealing with is going to be on the local and on the state level, and that's where you have more power. And as we saw in this last election, that's actually where, and that's the way that our election is designed. The states have the power, so I think the right has ceded that too long, and we saw that. So I'm actually kind of glad to see things like the precinct project and people getting more involved now in a local election to start changing that around and getting involved in their school boards and things like that. So that gives me hope. So the silver lining to all of this, which is good.
Yeah. So do you guys have like a module or a training thing that you do with people to get them to be like in the precinct project and things like that?
We aren't formally working with the precinct project. It's one of the things like, I mean, I support, I think their work is great. Um, but we did actually have a two-part leadership series with the Leadership Institute back in January and February of this year. I believe we are offering something right now. That's a different department. They are offering candidate briefings, I believe is what they're called. Um, and I know that that's essentially, yeah, it's people who are declared candidates and helping them, fill in candidates who want to be America first. It's nonpartisan. We actually have had Democrats and Republicans come in and understand what it means to be America first, and more or less just that's being held monthly. We just had our second one, and yeah, so we're looking to get people on the ground who are looking to run or who are just running or who want to support their candidates in their area. So yeah.
Gotcha. So I think we're having some technical issues with people being able to ask questions. So I'm gonna look through the
Oh, I'm sorry.
voice chat. No, it's our fault completely. So let me look through some of this really quick to find a question to ask. How much do or how expensive and grueling lawsuits from Judicial Watch against Democratic counties breaking the Voter Registration Act help LAA in their election integrity pursuits? Do you
As
guys
far as
do you guys team up with Judicial Watch at all, or are you watching what they're doing to try and piggyback off of what they're working on?
we have not partnered with Judicial Watch. I know some people in here have had a background with Judicial Watch in some capacity, but we are not formally working with them. What they're more or less doing is looking at voter rolls that have people who should be cleaned out and suing states. Like I believe they sued and won against California, if I remember correctly. 1.5 people were removed from there. And so we're pretty much going to be focusing on that probably more in 2022 to clean voter rolls up. But no, to answer your question, we're not working with Judicial Watch, but they're on the same. I mean, we're on the same side for sure.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna try and get some hands raised. All right, we got one. Nictobot, I'm gonna invite you up to speak. Thank you, Nux, for fixing it.
Hey, good evening, gentlemen. Radio check.
Hey, Nictobot, we can hear you.
Hey, Nick Devon.
Early. So I got really, I got one serious question, and one joke question for you.
Okay, let's take. I'll surprise me.
All right. So,
Go for it.
serious question: what is your stance on the National Firearms Act and other unconstitutional gun legislation?
It's kind of a loaded question when you say it's unconstitutional. It's kind of built into the question, but it's unconstitutional.
Outstanding. All right. My other question is: who is Brandon, and why do we keep cheering for him?
Who is Brandon?
Yeah, and why do we keep cheering
He
for him?
is he's the champion of the NASCAR race, and people are really enthusiastic around the country. I mean, he's got 4 number 1 singles going on around. Why?
Very nice. Thanks.
That's the
Thanks.
PG. That's the
Right.
PG answer. I don't know where this is going to be playing, so I can't really. I don't know where it's going to
It's
go.
all
But
good.
yeah,
Don't worry about it. No, it's
All right,
nice.
man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Nickelbot. All
thanks,
right,
Nick.
we're gonna have K-Mox come up to the stage and ask his question. Go ahead and accept the invite, K-Mox.
Hello. This is Illinois calling. All right.
Yeah.
My
Hey, K
question
Mox.
is: if Virginia governor election, if there is like sus activity with it, will you be doing like an audit of it or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, one of the places we definitely want to get going is was in Virginia. Funny enough, if you look on our site, initially the plan was to work in Virginia and Pennsylvania, um, but we ended up getting funding and support in Arizona, so that's where we ended up going because we are a small nonprofit. We've only been around for about 6 months. Um, but yeah, if we find something that's definitely unusual with the voter rolls, we would absolutely look into that. No question.
Yeah, I think Virginia, we want to try and get ahead of it as much as possible, which isn't too good right now because we're so close to the end of the race. But definitely we want to get ahead of some of those issues that might pop up.
As I've said before, it seems like one of those things people don't care about until their candidate loses. And if it's a close law, I mean, listen, if you lose by like 300,000 votes, then it wouldn't have mattered. I mean,
Yeah,
that
of
being
course.
said, the people say, well, it's fraud, whatever, it's 300,000. I also don't like that attitude where it's kind of like, whatever, right? Like, oh, whatever, he
Nope.
lost. But I'm like, yeah, but there's still 500 illegal votes. Granted, he still wouldn't have won, but that could have easily swayed a local election or a state measure or something on the ballot. And also, why is it okay to disenfranchise 500 people, right, who cast it legally? So, ideally, the goal is that there's no illegal registrations or no legally cast ballots, right? So I do think cleaning them out, whether or not your candidate won, is a goal that everyone should be working on. And as I said before, doing it ahead of time is much easier, and being proactive is much easier than doing it, retroactively, because then it's kind of too late, and then you just kind of look like you're sour grapes, and then they're just going to fight you into say, it's moot or, has no standing or something like that. So, yeah.
Exactly. All right. Next up, I invited Trump or Treason, but he's got to accept the invite. So I've invited Palm up next. Palm, go ahead and accept the invite. Oh, no, Trump or
Oh, there he is.
Treason's up.
No, they're both on stage.
That's okay. We'll let Trump or treason go first. Palm, you can hold off for a second.
Hey, Trump.
You're on mute, Trump or
Oh,
treason.
you're muted.
There you go.
Hello?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, this is Trump or Treason. Good job, Ian and Sub. Sounds great.
Thanks.
Nice work.
Thank you.
Hey, sorry to put you on the spot, but I kind of got a work-related question for you, Ian. And maybe if you don't know, maybe someone else in the audience can know. So I've been working on California, and I've been trying to get to it all year, right? And I'm kind of
Yep.
finding a trend that I can't easily explain, and there must be something I'm missing. So when I've done like 3 counties so far, and what I'm seeing is that there are more official counted votes by the state and by the county reported than there are votes on the rolls, right? So I take the history and the voter roll, match them up, and for example, like Orange County, there's like the official count is like 1.7 million votes, but the actual voter rolls and the votes cast from the voter rolls is about 1.5 million. So there's like a discrepancy of 200,000. And I'm trying to find what obvious rational thing I'm missing that would explain that, and I haven't found it yet. But doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It's just there's something might be missing. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I'd have to see that situation, but I had something like this. Actually, someone yesterday sent me in Michigan, and there was 2 things. So I don't remember California's registration off the top of my head. I want to say it's like 16 now or 17,
It's
but you can register.
22 million.
No. I'm sorry. The age of registration.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
actually, in California, they're pre-registering. So you don't
Right.
have to be 16 or 17, just born here, and you're
Right.
already set up to be automatically registered when you hit 18.
Well, that's where I'm kind of wondering. I'm wondering if like, well, that would explain the numbers you would have, but they didn't vote. So that's one thing, possibly. Like they're registered, but they didn't vote. I don't know if that would explain it. The other thing that this person was bringing to me was he was trying to like compare census data, but I'm like, the census is taken on April
Yeah.
1st.
Yeah,
That's
no.
7 months later. So I don't
No,
know.
no,
Like
no.
I don't know if that was sort of what you're possibly running
No,
into.
I don't think either of those would apply because what I'm saying is that there's 1.7 million reported votes, but when
Okay.
you look at the rolls, there's 1.5 million, right?
And it's from November 2020, or was
Yeah,
it this most recent? Like, okay.
yeah, no, it's 2020.
Yeah, that is. I don't. I mean, I'm trying. The only thing I
Okay,
could think of would be people who
nothing
moved
comes
out
off
or
the.
something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is weird.
All
I
right.
don't know. But we could talk.
Maybe
Since
some of the
since I
rules
see
got
you since I
cleaned.
see you in the server all the time, shoot me what you got, and we'll talk about it because
All right,
you and I
we'll do.
worked quite a few times of it. So yeah, that's interesting.
Okay.
That's a huge discrepancy.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yep,
Thanks, Joe.
thanks, Trump or treason. So for the rest of the audience, what you just witnessed is actual cooperation between people within a Discord server and a pack in verifying voter rolls versus actual voter counts. So this is a way that you can actually get involved and do something that makes a difference. And I think it's really important to see that for anybody here, it doesn't take much. All you need to do is get involved. You'll get the data, look at the data, and see how things go. All right, Palm, we got you up. Next, welcome to the stage.
Hey, Ian. Hey,
Hey,
Sub.
Palm.
Thanks for joining us tonight, Ian.
Yeah, thanks for having. Thanks for
Uh,
being such a huge. You're doing so much great work over there in Pennsylvania, by the way. You've been really rocking it. I see all
Sure.
the progress you made, which is awesome.
Yeah, I got a lot of work to do. I would like to do more, but my question is, you mentioned not being on the defense, come 2022. What timeline and really prerequisites do you think need to be met, maybe 6 months, 3 months before the 2020 election to be considered not on the defense?
I wouldn't say you never want to be in the defense. I mean, obviously, if you listen, if someone cast a fraudulent vote, you could still like say, "Hey, this was a fraudulent cast vote," right? But it's a lot harder to go after that. So I don't say you can never do it, but it's better to go on the offense and try to find that. As far as the timeline, I mean, the earlier the better. I mean, I can't say, oh, I guess I would put it this way: before, or at least before early voting. which is I mean, I don't know what it is in Pennsylvania. I'm guessing it's like ridiculous early because that's what they're doing. But it's like, is it 45 days? I'm guessing now.
Yeah, something like
You'd
that.
probably want to get, yeah, at minimum 3, because I don't know. Each state has their own rules, and each county has their own rules within that for how to remove it and the process, etc. Um, I don't know the answer to that. I can't pretend, but I would say that the best is the sooner the better. So if you have something that's legit and you can back it up, um, and again, you have the most power in my experience from what I've seen. People who are candidates who are doing this tend to have the best ability because they have uh, I can't think of that legal term now, but basically something to lose. Whereas as opposed to like average voter, um, because you could say, hey, I lost this and it cost me money, etc. So ideally, you find a candidate who's running in the state or at least in the county or precinct or whatever, and say, hey, I'm getting disenfranchised by these fake votes. Or if you could find someone who's running for Secretary of State, all the better. Say, hey, this is really sloppy. I would clean these out and expose that. I think sometimes just public pressure is another way to do it, but you really want to make sure it's accurate because a lot of what I see is not accurate. And I don't know the rules for every state because each state, like I said, there's 50 states. All the rules are different. And kind of what you probably saw with Trump, I don't know every situation without having seen it in front of me. So a lot of times I just have to kind of say, let's talk about it later. Send me it. I'll take a look at it and dive a little deeper. You also want to be really careful not to be claiming things are illegal when they're actually illegal. You always want to say, is there any way this could possibly be legal? Is this person like, I don't know, a military person or a student? Or are they homeless? And that's why they're in an empty lot, right? Things like that. So you want to be really, really careful before making an accusation. So yeah, dot all your I's, cross all your T's.
Great. Thanks, Pom.
Thanks.
Yep. Guthix, we got you up next.
All right. Hi, Ian. I'm Guthix's Balance. I just wanted to ask a more general professional question.
Sure.
What would you, in your professional context, give as advice to like young individuals aspiring for your current type of role professionally? Like, see a school or internship or background or civic participation that's outside the aforementioned by sub here in the general context.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, with my situation, it was weird, right? And I'll actually even kind of explain a little further. Like when I was working in the voter integrity project with the post office box, like we were all doing that for free. I did it because I was interested in it, and I've kind of got some managerial experience and organizing teams, and I'm not extremely good at all the data details like on the nitty gritty, but I don't necessarily have to be. I just know who I can find and how to organize that. So like find what you're good at and find what you like because and I think that's kind of when you're starting out, whether it's an internship or just volunteering. I mean, that's one of the great things about volunteering. You don't really have anything to lose, right? You can try all kinds of stuff. Maybe you like something you never knew about, and you're not committed to a job or you hate it now, but you're stuck there because it's your your way of your income. So just volunteer, get involved with different groups. Constantly network. I guess at your age, it's like just try new things and say yes to stuff. The worst case is you don't like it. Say okay, it's not for me. And then I guess if you wanted to get involved, whether it's in elections or doing anything like this, just read about your field. So if you're interested in politics and elections, read about that. Read up on the laws in your state. Read up on cases that are going forward. I guess just listen to what interests you, and but don't be afraid to try new things and just go in that direction. And also be looking to see what you can contribute of value to other people. That's usually a good way you'll get hired because it's like, hey, this is valuable. I'll pay you for it. That's usually how you can create your own job too. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Sounds good. So Ian, speaking on rules that you mentioned with Palm and just talking about the laws that you just mentioned as well, what is Look at America doing in regards to voting laws and looking, because I know there were a lot of state legislatures that were looking at making some changes to the voting laws or trying to shore up some voter integrity in those states. What are you guys doing? Even on the Dem side, they were trying to get some things passed as well. I think the House Bill 1 was one of
Yeah.
the biggest ones. Can you explain what Look at America was doing? Maybe explain what you know about HB1 and what other states are trying to do to replicate HB1?
Yes. So I'll try to go to your first question, which was what is Look Ahead America doing on the legislation
Of course, thanks.
aspect? We have, if you go to lookaheadamerica.org/integrity, you can see our 6 points of integrity. And so those things are including thumbprint authentication of absentee ballots. So it's basically two-factor authentication, signature and thumbprint. Mandating the public voter list hygiene, and making it very clear what's being removed, not just doing it in secret. One of the things we're looking at is banning the use of black box voting equipment. So that would be some of the groups I discussed earlier tonight, such as Dominion, ESNS, Smartmatic, which was a company I worked for, by the way, and some of the other ones, and replacing that
Sequoia.
with open source voting.
Yeah,
Sequoia, I think, actually got incorporated by, or taken over rather, by Dominion, if I remember
Yeah, I
correctly.
think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those are the ESNS and Heart Intercivic, I think, the fourth one. But essentially, those are like you and I have no seeing what's black box, and so the source code is hidden. And people say, "Oh, it's this." There's like these flaws with it. Like, I get that, but legislation, like, there's the ideal, and then there's kind of the real how it works. Like, a lot of this stuff is very, very slow and baby steps, and so we want to get. There's three other ones, but I'm not going to list the whole thing. You can look at lookaheadamerica.org/integrity and see them. But we want to get those going in each state, because if we had those things in the last election, none of the stuff like drop boxes would have been in place. We wouldn't have had, Zuckerberg funding not just one area, but he would have had to fund equally all areas, right? Not just targeting. A lot of these too, people talk about fraud and say, "Oh, why aren't you doing stuff?" Some of these places, some of these states rather, or counties, just don't have sufficient funding or sufficient staff, and sometimes it's just that because they don't really take. It's like, oh, there's no fraud. Let me think. I think, I see CMD, who's actually we worked and did a little our own thing in Tennessee. CM was on those emails with me, and the person in the clerk's office was very nice, but she was saying, "Oh, that's weird. Like, we don't really think there's anything here, right?" And there's just very naive, because they either don't do it or just don't know how to use like Excel or something. I don't know what it is. So a lot of it is just going to be educating on and trying to fund that. One of the things we're doing actually right now, since you mentioned legislation, in New Jersey of all places, we actually have one of our state volunteer coordinators. She's great. She got in touch with a state senator, and they are proposing legislation to get general public license, open source voting, in New Jersey. So that would obviously be in effect, I guess, after the midterms. It would go in effect, I think, 2023, because that's how these always work. But hey, it's the fact that they're even discussing it, the fact that it's going on the floor is kind of a big deal. And a lot of these big companies don't want that happening. We also have made some inroads with San Francisco, of all places, too. Those are Democrat organizations. We actually had Brent Turner. He was a guest we had like a couple months ago, and he's a Democrat. But he feels the same way. He was like, these companies are corrupt as hell. We need to get them out of our elections, right? So obviously he has different political aims and outcomes and everything, but we agreed on this thing. So we work with both parties on being like, listen, if the election's fair, the outcome is the outcome. But right now, the problem with the 2020 election is that, as we saw in Georgia and Wisconsin, it was so sloppy, and we're going to see in Arizona too. It was so sloppy. We don't know, right? I can't say therefore Trump won, but I can't say for sure Biden won. It's like it was so sloppy, like don't know, and they shouldn't have been certified.
Of course.
But it's what it is. They're not. People, and that's the other thing. People say, "Oh, they're going to decertify." You have a much better chance of decertifying the machines. You have a much better chance of reforming a lot of laws and closing a lot of loopholes that allowed a lot to happen. Because I think we are not using our time wisely and going on the offense, and it's just too much goals. They're just. I mean, it's not. I'm not trying to be negative here, but I just try to think what's the realistic we can actually accomplish in the short amount of time
Of course.
So that's kind of the stuff we're working on.
Yeah. Return on investment is very important, especially in these types of situations. I think with Wisconsin, the number one thing that really struck me was that the request for ballots or mail-in ballots, you needed to have certain criteria met, and a lot of that criteria was not met in Wisconsin. And so all of those ballots that didn't have the proper criteria met for a mail in ballot should have been null and void from the very beginning. But they bypassed it because of
Exactly.
COVID. And a lot of people don't understand that if you have a law, I mean, I can say that almost everybody in this server understands it, but if you have a law, you should be following that law. Immigration law, we all know that illegal immigrants that come across the border illegally are violating the law. It's not a humanitarian thing or anything else like that. It's a law that was violated that makes you a criminal. The same thing happens with Wisconsin.
Agree.
All these people who requested mail-in ballots that didn't provide the proper identification for the mail-in ballots violated the law, and those ballots shouldn't have been counted. And I think we're probably both in agreement that the law was violated, but it was accepted at the end of the day. Thus, it should have been decertified based off of that type of stuff. And I think Look Ahead America has put out that information saying that a certain number were unlawful votes based on mail-in ballots, and that amount superseded the amount of the victory. So
Yeah, and that's actually what we put that in our report, and not only we looked at like the minimum projection versus the likely projection, which was over like 157,000, if I remember correctly. The minimum I think was still 24,000, which still was beyond the margin, supposed margin of victory. But yeah, there's no way. We just found so many people. The reason we also said we don't know is because people say, well, it was only Biden. It's like, no, we found at least seem to be Republicans or Trump supporters. We don't. I mean, again, were they just lying on social media or in their registration? Don't know how they actually voted. Right. Once the ballot separated, we have no idea from the envelope that is refused.
Yep.
So
and they really
the Supreme
shouldn't
Court
have
ruled that way. Too. Yeah. It was like I said, it was a mess. So we'll never really know. The only thing, fortunately on that, since you mentioned, so it's not all doom and gloom. From what I just read today, and actually I've been kind of getting texts during this conversation. It looks like there's a group called Liberty Overwatch in Wisconsin, and so they're requesting the data. I believe they actually got in the Senate in Wisconsin to move forward with an audit, and I know because we had actually released that kind of around the time that they were talking about it. So we're trying to see if something can be done to at least clean it up and hopefully get some prosecutions going too, and make sure this never ever happens again.
Yeah, and I think especially for our server, and really what led a lot of people to Donald Trump was the inequity in the law for elites versus the common day average folk. They saw people getting away with stuff, especially in Washington, that if they were doing it themselves, they would be thrown in jail. And we see it with celebrities, elites, those types of folks, and to see it extended into the voter aspect of things, it's demoralizing. But at the same time, we need to push for equity and law. She's not blind for a reason. Lady Justice.
It's not even just with the elections, by the way. It was happening with January 6th. I'll say it because people are afraid to say, right? But for example, we saw with Antifa and BLM during the so-called Summer of Love, we saw Trump's inauguration, the J20 disrupt, January 20 event, right? Those people were let off within 48 hours with Kavanaugh's hearing. We saw a bunch of things. So it's only happening to one political party, right? Obviously, we're saying, listen, if someone committed violence, like they were attacking cops or blowing up cars or whatever, sure, they should be prosecuted. But why is it our side who says that the other side doesn't, right? And right now we have people languishing in jail, and so there's definitely, it seems like there's two sets of laws. We've also been working with with a bunch of groups to bring justice for the January 6th prisoners, the political prisoners. We've got the database of all the arrestees. We have the contact information that we determine, and as you may have seen, we had the large rally in September 18th. It's unfortunate though that more people don't support that kind of thing, because I think people are afraid to say it. Like, I was there on January 6th. It's not a crime. It wasn't a crime to go. People are like, oh, I wasn't there. DC, you're allowed to protest. If you felt that the election was stolen, or you felt that at least it was dirty, right? You were allowed to express that, right?
Mhm.
So that's not a crime. And actually, even going into the building wasn't a crime. I mean, you were waved in by the cops. That's all been shown. That's a fact, right? So that kind of stuff that we're seeing is it's unequal protection, I guess, or unequal application of the law. And so that's the stuff we're looking to expose. But we, unfortunately, since there is a double standard, we really, really have to have our cases watertight. And that's one of the things that our team is trying to be really careful with, is making sure we're not making mistakes that could undo the whole argument, because we just have to we're unfortunately held to a higher standard, like it or not. And so we just have to make sure that we are working with that. And I would love to get more people in our research team to help with that too. So that would be excellent if you guys could join up on our server afterwards.
Nice. So everybody, you heard him. He needs help. All right, Reddit is communist. We're going to take this last question because we know we got a doubleheader tonight.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Yep.
Welcome.
Welcome, or thanks. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Yep, you're good to go. Go ahead.
Okay, I haven't tried to use voice on this with Discord on this device yet. So this is also, I'm also known as Nimrod X from the LAA Discord, in case anyone doesn't recognize. But so my question was, as you might know, I'm like a long time like network security guy, and one of my main frustrations with like pretty much my whole life has been trying to convince people that security actually matters and that it's worth going through inconveniences and things like that. So my whole, pretty much my entire career has been one of being frustrated with people not taking things like, security, election integrity. And I'm not just talking about, even though my experiences with electronics and computers, it's like that's most of my experience. I have actually worked for university bureaucracies before, but what's your sense as far as like, think of everything as a system, and every system having security vulnerabilities, like with the mail-in voting envelopes being tampered with, or just whatever, not just the machines, but what is your sense as far as like trying to get people to take election security seriously? Like, how much of a problem is it? How much, I guess, sort of, oh, who cares about that kind of, lack of seriousness do you end up encountering? And is there anything we can do to, I guess, make that more of a, kind of get across to people what's at stake, and why election security, election integrity matters?
Yeah, no problem. That's a lot of info there, but I think I hope I can answer all your question. I 100% agree that security is extremely important in the election, and I think it's funny to me that whenever your side wins, that people don't seem to care about it. Right? It's only when your side loses then you care. We saw that happen in 2016. If you watch the HBO documentary Kill Chain, it's a very left-leaning documentary. It's HBO. It's kind of redundant, but So there's Kamala Harris and Amy Klobuchar and a bunch of other Democrat senators saying how these machines are hackable and unsafe, and they are correct. And now on our side, we are seeing people get angry. And I guess, like I said, there's a silver lining here. This is opportunity to start working on this stuff and cleaning it up on a state and local level. I guess that kind of answers your question. Like, it's people only really care about it when their candidate loses, which is unfortunate. It should be something we all care about. Look, if I take this however you will, but if Biden won fair and square, I don't think that people would have an issue with it, in the sense that they felt like, okay, that's unfortunate that he won or whatever, because I know the server is right leaning, right? They would say, okay, he won. It's whatever, news bias. And by the way, I believe that was actually the factor, because they suppressed the news stories and stuff. Just side note, as well as the mail-in ballots. I think that was the main thing, not so much the machines. That all being said, in terms of security, yeah, like that's the stuff we discuss in terms of integrity. Those are the 6 points we believe if we had that going in each state, those 6 points rather, then all states would be much more secure. There would be two-factor authentication. there really is no way to authenticate with ballots. A lot of these ballots didn't even have signature, the mail-in ballots, that is. And the machines are closed source, so we have no real way of knowing in the software, right? So we're hoping, I don't feel comfortable, that our elections are handled by third parties that don't disclose that, which should be public. So yeah, as far as how do you make people aware of it? Well, right now we've got the ability with the fire underneath us to get stuff going. I think part of the problem, unfortunately, too, and I hate to say this, but I feel like there's unfortunately a lot of grifters our side as well who use this as an opportunity to raise a bunch of money. Sublime, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the GOP, $307 million or something,
something close to that.
claiming to combat fraud. And have they even spent any of it to combat any fraud? I don't think they spent maybe or small amount. Dinky report and it was wasted, right?
I really haven't seen anything, especially at my local level.
Yeah.
But yes, they have been fundraising off of it for sure.
Right, and that's my point. Is a lot of groups are out there, or people are, and a lot of them push super provably false theories, right? And this stuff is hard too to try to prove it. You have to be thorough, and there's just so much of it out there. I guess what we're trying to do is just kind of establish a name for ourselves and try to make sure, hey, our stuff is solid. You can check us. If we're wrong, we'll correct it, right? That's one of the things we're trying to do. And I think part of it's also, too, there's just a lot of misinformation and disinformation, and people, frankly, not really knowing what not really knowing what they're talking about regarding their election laws. And I think people use that ignorance to either fundraise off of that ignorance or to, or just dismiss their claims no, this is legal and here, ignore them. And I feel like neither side's each other. So the best you could really do, I think, would be to join us as a volunteer. We would help train you on your local level. If you're a state volunteer coordinator, we actually ask that you actually would be more involved. You'd be meeting with us weekly. We'd be training you a bit on your local level work. But even if you're a volunteer, your state volunteer coordinator will be guiding you in terms of here's actions you can do, here's laws and stuff you can look at to bring changes. And like I said, that law we saw being proposed in New Jersey came through a state volunteer coordinator contacting her state, state senator. I mean, she didn't do anything special. She just called and said, hey, I'd like to set a meeting to discuss this, proposal. And they had some conversations back and forth, and voila, now it's getting introduced. So it's not magic. I mean, it's just really just being able to communicate with people and knowing your stuff and explaining why this is a problem and how we clean it up. But unfortunately, a lot of our side has just kind of relegated that or government's for losers or whatever, this kind of dismissive attitude. And I think we're seeing now we do have to all be civically engaged to some extent. So hopefully we're going to start combating that in the coming years. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. If not, I guess see me in the other server. We'll continue.
Of course. I think you did a really good job, Ian. And Ian, I just want to wrap this up because we are at a time limit now. So thank you very much for coming tonight. For those who are interested, how can they get involved with Look Ahead America? Where can they find you? Where can they find Matt?
Yeah, sure.
Just give us some information about it.
So thank you for that. As far as volunteering with Look Ahead America, you can go to lookaheadamerica.org/volunteer. And you just sign your name up in the database, and one of our state volunteer coordinators will contact you if they have one in that state. We are looking on growing. We don't have all 50 states. I believe last time we have 33 out of 50. So we've grown, but we still need to get 17 more. So if you have, 10 to 15 hours or so per week and can give a lot more time, we really need state volunteer coordinators, ideally 3 per state, so there's a solid network in case someone can't do some event. Go to lookaheadamerica.org/lead. Of course, you can always join us in our Discord server. I'm pretty accessible every day. I mean, I'm here all in this server too. You can go to discord.gg/lookaheadamerica. I'll give you my emails through that way. And if you can't do any of those things, Matt always says, time, talent, and treasure. If you're able to give, go to lookaheadamerica.org/donate. That does help us. I mean, voter rolls, as I said, are expensive in some states, or having to get materials for a lot of this is not free, including the town hall we're hosting right now. So, we try to keep expenses very low. We try to do things thoroughly, and I definitely put more than 40 hours a week in, 60. But we really appreciate any help. And if you can't do any of those things, spread the word about us and share our work. That also helps get us out there too. So I appreciate that.
Sounds
Thanks,
great,
Sublime.
Ian. Yep, of course. If you could just go ahead and post the town hall that's coming up or that's currently going on into the voice chat text.
Is that where it is?
And we,
Okay.
yep, and we really thank you for your time tonight, Ian, and thanks so much for coming on and joining us tonight.
Yeah, and if anyone wants, I can. I don't know if you guys have something like this, but I'm willing to do some kind of voice chat and answer, for maybe 10, 15 more minutes and just answer some questions if someone wants to. I've seen the other ones, and I'll be afterwards, so it doesn't
Of
bother me.
course. Yeah, anybody interested, go ahead and jump into voice chat after this is finished.
Yeah, awesome.
All right.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yep, and thank you everybody else for joining us tonight. And this concludes our guest AMA with Ian Camacho.